I figured this was either going to be really, really bad, or it was going to be serviceable, maybe even fun. And just like how predictable the story in this was, I was right on the money. And that's true for both sides, though I am more leaning towards the latter, with this being an ultimately serviceable experience. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, and for the longest time, I thought this was a Red Notice sequel. Even after I saw set photos of J.K. Simmons wearing a Santa suit, I just assumed it was some weird hijinks. But with the release of the trailer, I finally figured out what this was, which was a little bit of the Santa Claus, a little bit Men in Black, but not nearly as fun as either. And for the emotional side of it, I wanted so much more, especially with the movie being a Christmas one. The story attempts to tug at something with change and the spirit of Christmas, but none of that sentiment hits nearly as hard as it should have. There was a well-written line here and there, like early on when Santa says something about how it's difficult to change someone, so instead, we must allow people to change themselves. Yet, for every line like that, the script also included a cliched line or element that was played out a decade ago. Dwayne Johnson and Chris Evans play off of each other with a middling amount of chemistry, and the fact that both are insufferable to begin with doesn't help. Yet their surface-level conversations later on managed to somewhat turn it around for me, though that's not really true. Because as a matter of fact, it was one aspect introduced maybe an hour into the movie that I thought was genuinely great and was what got me truly invested into the story. I'll save what that is for the spoiler section, but just know that that should have been the whole movie. But aside from that, the action and choreography were occasionally fun enough to keep me entertained, and the stunts were filmed well enough so that they could be seen, which should be the standard, but sadly isn't. So it's great when that's actually the case. Although that was all overshadowed by tons of weightless visual effects, because at least a quarter of the runtime looks like a video game. It's also 20 minutes too long, and with the whole thing being predictable and tensionless, it's hard to recommend you go out and see this. Plus, the movie cost $250 million as well, and that right there is a travesty and a clear mismanagement of funds. However, this isn't the cinematic dumpster fire some have been calling it. It's just another stock standard Christmas action flick, and if you enjoy those, you'll enjoy this. So if you're bored out of your mind and need a mildly entertaining surface level adventure, then check out Red 1. Because now, it's time to get into the spoilers, so I can stop being vague and just say what worked and what didn't. And I mentioned that the movie was a little too long, but to be specific, that is a result of multiple storylines that should have been consolidated or just cut entirely. Like Garcia the polar bear. He had 2 seconds of action and maybe 5 lines. I wonder just how much it cost to put him on screen because he was just unnecessary. And speaking of unnecessary, why was Grilla testing out snow globes? What does that add to the story? It seems like that was there just to keep her busy, because otherwise, what was she supposed to do to keep her from enacting her evil plan? Which wouldn't have worked anyway, because I guess all it takes to get out of one of those snow globes is to have a moral epiphany. Also, completely separate, but is the Rock's little form his true form? Because he's an elf, right? I honestly don't think so, because there were some other elf-looking creatures at the North Pole, but I'm just gonna believe that in this movie, the Rock is an elf. I mean, the VFX were terrible with that whole sequence, but I still loved seeing a puny Dwayne Johnson. That and him getting slapped by Krampus, I was incredibly entertained by. Maybe it's just because that went against the usual macho man aesthetic that he seems to be obsessed with and I am tired of, but him getting his face rocked, no pun intended, by Krampus's slap made that all the more enjoyable. Really glad that was kept in, though I know Johnson's ego probably fought against it. But that also leads into the main reason why I was compelled to review this movie in the first place. Because within this story is something that I genuinely think could have been amazing. And I could fault the movie for not diving into it as much as I immediately hoped, but I am not being ironic when I say that I loved everything about Krampus. From his look to his dynamic with his brother, I just wish that he was the main villain so that could be focused on. I don't hate the actual villain, but having an infinitely more compelling character that has an antagonistic role in the story does not help her case. There are also some pretty good jokes, yet even the ones that I liked were drawn out to a point of unintended awkwardness. The back and forth of the line, "I want you to say, let's save Christmas," was hilarious, and the interaction between the two characters was fun and endearing. But then, the joke just kept on going for another 30 seconds, and that's telling for pretty much everything in this movie. But what did you think about Red 1? Did you hate it? Are you indifferent? Let me know down in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly video essays and reviews, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.